our next speaker is ready to go. So let's bring him up. His name is Kevin, and Kevin is CTO of Touchless Inc. and is also a co founder of a think tank that is working to bring fast tech to the automotive industry. Hey, Kevin, how are you doing?
Good, good. Glad to be
Excellent.
here.
Thank you so much for coming. So, where are you joining us from?
I'm from Toronto today. I used to always say I'm from an airport because I always would travel a lot, but no, I'm in home base with the important emoji pillows. So
Excellent. They look
Edmonton
very
style.
awesome. Um, okay, so Kevin is going to talk to us about transitioning the Koons Automotive Group website to Sanity and a Gatsby project in more detail. But this is a very large automotive group. I think you said it's $3 billion automotive group, correct? And they are in the DMV area of the United States, which is Virginia, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. I'm super excited to hear about this. And remember, everyone, if you have any questions during Kevin's talk, stick them in the chat and I will ask them as soon as Kevin's done. All right, let's share your screen. All right, you all set?
Yeah, yeah, great.
Okay, I'm going to drop off.
This was a fun project. A little bit crazy because we did in a few months what would normally take a year or more with a team that I've never met before and doing it all virtually. So this is like a fun project. But yeah, just some background on Koons. Koons is one of the top 15 auto groups in the one of the 15 largest auto groups in the U.S. And they have one of the most efficient operations and super professional in the way that they deal with things, which is what drew me to them. Um, and also just their intention around building a better experience. You know, they've sold cars to about 3 million people, over 3 million people over the years. And so they've learned a lot about, what people want and what people hate about the car buying experience, especially with dealerships. And that resonated with me because it's one of the things that I'm kind of focused on as we use Sanity and others to figure out how can you use structured data to help people with disabilities use the web better. Because if you have clean data and clean structure to things, first Google likes it better, but also people like it better, especially if they have a disability. So why this matters, obviously, this is from a recent Gatsby talk I did, but just this concept of a whole bunch of people in the U.S. have a disability and often it's undiagnosed. In fact, 3 in 4 people who have a mental illness, which right now, because of the pandemic, a lot of young people are affected by this, they don't receive treatment. And so these are the people that are using websites, right? They're stressed, they're anxious, and a car buying experience is really stressful. And people generally don't like to give their information out because they think they're going to be hounded by salespeople, and usually they're right. Anyway, so that's kind of one of the things that drew me to them is just this shared vision of how do we build something really performant, really fast, but also really accessible. And if you kind of compare, like the previous state before we started, it was kind of around here where you had, a lot of auto websites, especially, their previous one, failed core vitals. People would leave after one page. Most people would do the research elsewhere, mainly because it was just so slow. And these are now this wasn't their exact site. One of theirs is later, but this is kind of what's normal in some dealerships, right? Is a lot of pop-ups, a lot of backgrounds. They have their little accessibility button, but it's a lot of content and it's a lot of uh, unstructured information that is layered on top of each other. And so this was really tough. And in order to fix it, it really was about data. Like if we wanted a really clean, fast experience, and we wanted to build the world's fastest automotive dealership website, and that was kind of one of the goals at the beginning. But in order to do that, we had to fix the data, and this is where Sandy came in. And to kind of paint the picture, what's common in the auto world is that you have tons of pieces of information about a car, but there's lots of missing gaps, right? And maybe there's information that's non-standard. Maybe the names of vehicles are kind of strange. Maybe there's missing prices. Maybe there's missing, um, you know, like fuel economy information. And so Sanity became the key uh, solution to solving this because we could aggregate data from multiple places and use Sanity as that bridge to really have the cleanest information and then cascade that out to various places. So the way the tech stack works is we have the legacy inventory system that couldn't change. That sends information to Amazon S3. We then start a syncing service, and where we ended up actually with it, and I don't think this is like final state where we want to end up. Oops, there we go. There's a little bit of a tunnel vision there. um, where we ended up with it was a bunch of serverless functions, which basically sync the data to Sanity from the legacy system on a regular basis. And that includes uh, updates to pricing, availability, removing vehicles, adding missing information, adding photos, removing photos. What was complex about this is you're talking about 8 to 10,000 cars and 150 to 200,000 photos. Actually, right now I think the count is just over 300,000 photos, and there's still another couple 100,000 to add. So you're talking about a pipeline of how to make sure that inventory data stays in sync with all of the changes that happen every hour, and dealing with photos that come in and out. And it was really difficult actually. And we ran into some different errors right around performance and around just on hitting the APIs to sync these things. And what we did with these is, and happy to share if anyone's in a similar situation, share some of the learnings that we've had and things we've tried. But just coming up with a queue system and a pool to be able to make sure that these various sync jobs, happened. And what the flow again is, we got inventory goes to Sanity. Sanity then fans it out to Gatsby to build the site, fans it out to various indexes like in Algolia to be able to handle sorting and autocomplete. And I'm sure that we're going to sync it with more places to like auto-generate pages, like we've done in other projects. So SanityBee has become a big glue to this. But this is what we ended up using is a set of serverless functions on Gatsby Cloud to do the syncing and to maintain it. And then how we've done the back end of it. I mean, this is just a small preview of it, and we've got new versions in mind. But this is where we tried to standardize the data behind the scenes in a more universal way. So you have these locations, for example, that cars belong to. We then would use Sanity to track relationships, like this location belongs to which entity, and then it has various departments and identities that can get attached to it. We then also keep in here a list of like brands across different things, so that way there's a clean, good quality brand that is available, that is sourced from the brand's website, all the latest assets. So you end up with clean locations, vehicles, models, overrides, and a sense of relationships between this data, which Sandy does quite well because it kind of, what we found anyway in this process is it can keep track of these references and these relationships, either with very fixed binding between this is related to that, or soft relationships where you can break those relationships on one end and keep it on the other. So again, happy to walk through to folks later if you want to dive into how we set up the back end of this. But it was pretty it was pretty fun to kind of figure out how to do it, and end up in a place where you end up with a page like this where things are nicely categorized, cleansed, and sourced from various places. And we're not, I wouldn't consider us done yet, but I would say, like, in general, when you count, not including pixels and stuff that are installed, the page load time is, in general, is about 0.2, zero point 0.3 seconds. And you go from a vehicle page, a search result page, to a inside vehicle page in about 40 to 50 milliseconds. So we were pretty excited about where the performance could be when you could use Sanity as that glue to really modernize this experience. And where we want to go with it is use Sanity to bring in brand assets into these as well. So in addition to just the typical things that people would be familiar with, like the stats and stuff, but what about the other assets related to this vehicle, like videos that the manufacturer would have had, different images, um, different types of testimonials? So we start building out these really cool libraries, I think, over time, on a per vehicle basis. And where we've ended up with it so far, and we launched this a couple weeks ago. So far, it's averaging north of 3 times the leads per day, and I consider us to do, wanting to do a lot more with the platform and the way that we've set this up. Um, but yeah, been pretty happy with the experience. But it was a learning curve uh, using Sanity in a situation where there was such high volume of content changing on a daily basis, and dealing with images to the amount that we did. Um, but yeah, overall, definitely would still recommend it. It's just learning how to how to deal with it. Um, well, the other things that we also plan on doing with Sanity, just to kind of talk about the roadmap a bit, is we've realized that we can start to use it to also store like variations. So we ended up running experiments on button labels, for example, uh, on just dealing, like, sometimes you'll see on a dealer website just different labels for buttons, and we found that we could use Sanity to run those experiments and figure out in which market what wording worked better. Um, so I think these are the ways that structured content can be used to create a more personalized experience. Um, what else is relevant? I think yeah, one thing that you'll notice in the experience, if you do get to check out Koons.com and play around with it, um, it is the main thing you'll notice about this compared to a lot of other sites is if you just try and start to like navigate one of these sites with a keyboard, and just dealing with like things like this where you should actually trap the focus within a menu that's open, or dealing with if you open up one of these guys, being able to trap things within that as well. Same thing with the modals on top, and all of this is powered from Sanity, just like the different images and the different positions. So, oh yeah, another thing we did on this project as well is so again, just talking about how like what we connected to Sanity. It was inventory data, syncing review data, syncing external data to enrich the vehicles, um, and historical information from Koons to figure out, what content should we actually port over, and where our customer is coming from, and let that inform the content that we create. So it was cool to see that we could be bringing in all these different sources into one place. Anyway, so that's basically the overview. But yeah, feel free to play around with it. Any feedback, let me know. I'm in the Sanity uh, community channel in Slack, just as Kevin Drube. And we're excited as part of AutoGenius, this think tank, to bring this setup into a whole bunch of other dealerships of similar or greater size, or ones that are smaller as well. So we have basic cohorts of groups that we're going to be starting to roll out over the coming months. So uh, I'm excited to see the impact this will have on people because it's going to make what is normally a very stressful buying experience something that could actually be, enjoyable. But I appreciate the product and building with Sanity as we went through this. I guess just, oops, let me just stop my screen there because it's a bit of a a tunnel effect. Yeah, happy to answer questions as well and be a resource as we go, or I can, yeah, definitely dive into other areas that we went into while going through this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. This is a really big use case and also um, interesting because I don't know that I've heard people discuss sort of the mental health stressors of. We all know that that's present in buying a vehicle or similar style sales processes, but the consideration there, I think, is really amazing and fantastic. Can you talk a little about how that conversation like originally came up, or you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, absolutely. Well, so I started it before working on Auto Genius, just realizing that auto is just the place that needs it the most. But before that, started this initiative called Touchless, which is some open source tech to make the world usable for people on the autism spectrum. And that's a personal kind of mission of mine where, I've dealt with it in my family, and I have a younger brother who's autistic who lives with me as well, who is more has more of a need than I do. And I find the web very frustrating to use. And and that's just when I'm trying to do basic things, right? And so I think, yeah, this mission of, you know, uh, just like we have all this, this transformation in physical spaces to open up doors for us, or to, make pathways wider, or, touchless sensors and stuff. The idea is, why not have that exist for the digital world too? And you can do that through design. And primarily, what I learned over the years working in large, enterprise stuff, is that it's all about the data,
Yes.
actually, right? So the reason why things are so frustrated is that either people don't have the data in front of them to realize that it's a bad choice, like they don't know that the data is not telling them that that's a bad choice. So maybe lack of reporting, lack of visibility, or sometimes, they've never really been given the chance to try anything different because the data is so messy or unstructured. So if you clean the data and get it to a standardized state, you can then do some really cool stuff. It's like it establishes the baseline. So um, yeah, that's kind of, I guess, how we got there. Is it started off with this like, oh, I'm so frustrated with things, and then it turned into, I wonder why. And then the deeper you go, it's like, oh, it's the data. And it's no one's fault, really. It's just
Yeah.
kind of, it happens, right, to everybody. And it's hard to change. It's hard to get out of it. And so yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thesis. And then, but what was interesting with working on this project is, I mean, the initial sales pitch was, was about making things fast and making things, cleaner.
Hmm.
But it wasn't the intent initially, to get the ROI from making something accessible. But by layering that in there and saying, okay, that's going to be required. Like, we're going to make things fast, but in order to do that, we're going to make things clean from a data perspective, and we're going to require that this thing is accessible. If you can combine those things together, um, then you're going to get a better outcome. And that was the thesis anyway. And I mean, it's still early, but it seems like it's working out, right? It seems like if you make things simple, like I love what this site feels like on mobile, for example, where it feels like a native app. And primarily, we we did something really crazy with this, where um, we compiled most of it. Like we actually build the site, right? And all the variations, tens of thousands of pages all at once, instead of using kind of incremental loading. But what it does to the experience is makes it so darn fast, right? And so um, yeah, we probably caused a lot of stress to Gatsby too, because they're like, why are you doing it this way? But um, yeah, I think it's been a good outcome, and I think as long as we keep that, I think as a principle, as okay, here's just on, I was about to say something, so just while I'm on the spot, is that um, here's what we know. The faster the site is, and the more performant it is, and the more accessible it is, Google will rank it higher, right? The more structured and the more accessible, well, even the accessible, the more structured it is and the faster it is, Google will rank it higher. So I think as developers, we have a moral responsibility to make sure that what we put on the first page of Google better be good. Otherwise, we might be pushing down sites that actually are better for the public, um, just because our stuff is faster. And so if we're like, if we're, and I see this all the time where you have fast sites, but completely unusable on a keyboard or completely unusable with a screen reader, and that's wrong, I think, right?
Yes,
So
I fully
that
agree.
that's that's hard. It's super hard. It's super hard to do. We had to throw out dozens, dozens of components that I loved to use before, once we realized that they don't work well together and they don't allow you to navigate it, in a without a keyboard or without a mouse
Right.
easily. So,
And that can be challenging, right? But I think the use case here is that you about solving this at the forefront and not after the fact, right? So trying to sort of solve these accessibility things after the site is already live and after you've already built it creates another challenge. So the fact that you thought about it beforehand, I think, is a really fantastic way forward, and how we should all be thinking about sort of this idea of empathy and ethically driven web development, right? Because
mm,
I completely agree. Like, I think that if, the minute you decide to touch something on the internet or put it on the internet, you are ethically obligated to make sure as many people as possible can use it.
mm.
So
and
it's fantastic that you're thinking that way.
and I think it goes a step. You're just on that point. I think even though we all kind of maybe think, okay, keyboard accessibility is like, great for autism. You actually almost have to, you kind of have to shoot for AAA certification. And what AAA says is, great, do all the other stuff, but it matters what you say. So, what even is the label of your button? Like, if you have a button that's like, you know, explore your options, but it's really a credit application, that's wrong,
Yes.
right? And people will resort to that because no one's told them no, right? Or made or helped them appreciate why that might be hard for someone to do. But I think it goes back. I think the next layer is like, once we get good at structured content, can we create content for different types of people? Can we look at how do different audiences react to what we just wrote, and the quality of what we just wrote? Is it clear? And then if we're going to have buttons and icons and things, is it too busy? Is it clear? Is it misleading? That's going to be the next 10 years, right? Is how do we like how do we protect the users from uh, just using this tech in a out of excitement, but forgetting about the humanity side of it.
Definitely. And, making sure that we're always providing sort of that universal clarity, right? Because I think a lot of times as developers, we don't even think about the fact that most people don't have fast internet. So,
Yeah,
are you thinking
yeah.
about the things that you build in terms of people's access to speeds of internet and, socioeconomic status? Are you testing the things that you build on low cost devices? those type of things. So keeping those things in mind at the forefront, in addition to accessibility, is really fantastic. And I think it's really cool that you're talking about this, and this is how you're choosing to build your projects. But we have a couple more questions, so I want to get into, because I can talk about this
Sure.
stuff all day long. Um, so someone asked, how are you handling searching and performance? And they also asked, are you using any plugins like Algolia to help with that?
Yes, Algolia I've been very impressed with from a performance standpoint. Um, so okay, let's talk tech. Like, I mean, I'm happy to go deep on tech with folks later on architecture. Also, everything we're doing here is open source, so we're taking everything we've created and putting it into a thing called XO, which is a theme starting with Gatsby, but we'll bring it into others after. But it's an open source theme for enterprise. So yeah, you'll see us contributing some turnkey stuff pretty soon, especially for Sanity. We have some plugins in mind. Because if we dealt with it, everyone else will probably deal with it too. So that's one thing. But yeah, on the tech structure, we use uh, Sanity as kind of the middleware, right? So our job is we have to sync everything with it. So if you use Algolia and all those things, those are like ways to like cache, right?
Mhm.
Different views of Sanity. But if Sanity is wrong, then all those other things are wrong too. And that's the thing that we've found is the most painful, is making sure that Sanity is always correct and keeping
I
it
see.
in sync. So the main brunt of our work, and even what our open source APIs will kind of make available too, we're going to give away a bunch of them for free. Um, is just this idea of syncing, right? It's super hard to make sure that everything is up to date. So that's like number one, is making sure that that's good. The second layer is caching facets of that, which is Algolia, and then we have another layer on top, which is Cloudflare,
Okay.
where we can cache things there, and um, and then we use RudderStack to collect all the events. RudderStack eventually will feed everything to Algolia as well, so for personalization. But RudderStack will, over time, feed back into Sanity, like where people went and what did they search, where did they actually go and where are they from, and that can be used to auto-generate pages.
I
So there'll
see.
be yeah, the text. So yeah, what we found from a searching perspective is that Algolia is quite good. I think our future state, though, is that I want to go further in pre-compiling everything. I still think that the site could be faster. And like, because we in other tests, we've been able to consistently hit zero point 0.2 seconds full load time of a whole page. And I want to keep it that way. And what you'll notice is depending on what you're doing, it kind of bleeds into half second and zero point 0.7 seconds. I
Right.
don't love that. We can do better. So in those scenarios, I want it because going back to empathy, right? If like most people who are browsing the internet in the U.S. are in rural communities, even if they're in the city and they're in a building, a condo, internet's not great on your phone, right? It's not like so. So with that in mind, performance is really important. So uh, yeah, the intention would be that over time, the filters that you see on the site, which is powered by Algolia, we're going to pre-compile that and make that so there's no server calls, and that'll just be nice and fast. So like
Nice.
that's kind of eventually what we'll end up doing. But yeah, it's Algolia, Cloudflare, Gatsby Cloud, Hasura, uh, Postgres, but that'll probably move over to Snowflake over time, and and then some lambdas and other jobs to kind of keep track of everything.
Excellent. Okay, so I think we have time for about one more question. Um, there are some other questions in the Meetup chat, but Kevin is in the community Slack. So as soon as we're done, I'm sure he can hop in and answer some of those. But what made you land on Gatsby as a front end? Did you consider other front ends before you chose Gatsby?
Yeah, I like it because it's hard. I don't know. I like it because it's hard, and I think what I love about it is that it is data centric because I know that data matters. You know, working in telecom and banking and other, you know, sectors, I've come from a world where I've seen what data looks like at scale. And what I landed on Gatsby because you have single sourcing and GraphQL, and I've been using GraphQL for 6 years or 5 years, and it's or maybe closer to four, yeah, maybe about 5 years. Anyway, used it for a while. I'm familiar with the concept of building everything around GraphQL. And what primarily I gravitated towards it is just performance. It is twice as fast or 3 times faster than Next.js in general for many things, at least in my testing. For the types of things we were doing, you can't get the same performance. Svelte is too early, but still testing with that. I mean, there's still some great stuff like Remix and others that I'm still playing with, but they're still early, right? So what I like about it is there's an ecosystem, and I think people have, you know, gone into Gatsby. I know I did. Got into Gatsby when it was version 2.
Hmm.
Maybe got a little bit confused, left, tried some other stuff. But I think where it's what they've done in the last like 6 months is very interesting, and I think it's misunderstood the potential it can provide. And I'm able to generally get a Gatsby site to perform at zero point 0.2 seconds, which is equivalent to a Svelte page, right? And
Right.
so I find that interesting. Anyway, I don't I think I'm still expecting to double down on Gatsby for the time being for this type of scenario because another quick answer to that is because of the fact that you can pre-compile some stuff. Like vehicles are not changing every half second. They might change every hour, every couple hours. And so it it fits the idea of statically generating things,
Right.
and which is why, you know, why I picked it. But yeah, it's not for everybody. But sorry, I think a lot of situations are uh, like Gatsby is enough, right? You don't necessarily need to be trying to build a, you know, a web app because then the performance will act like a web app instead of a website.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That was a fantastic talk. It was great talking with you. Again, Kevin is in the community Slack. So if you have more questions for him, I'm sure he will jump in the hashtag meetup channel and can answer those. But thank you so much, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks so much. Okay, glad to be here.
Bye.